at breakfast yesterday.
Let's begin, briefly at least, with the first and most immediate question. What's happening before our eyes? And what do we learn from it about where the world is heading under the leadership of its most powerful forces? Even before September 11th, much of the population of Afghanistan was relying on international food aid for survival. Current estimates by the United Nations and others in a position to know are not seriously challenged. The estimates are that the number at risk since September 11th as a direct consequence of the threat of bombing and the attack itself has risen by about 2.5 million, by 50%, to approximately 7.5 million. Pleas to stop the bombing, to allow delivery of desperately needed food, have been rebuffed virtually without comment. These have come from high UN officials, from charitable agencies, and others. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, had already warned, even before the bombing, that over 7 million people would face starvation if military action were initiated. After the bombing began, it advised that the threat of a humanitarian catastrophe in the short term was very grave, and furthermore, that the bombing has disrupted the planting of 80% of the country's grain supplies, so that the effects next year will be even more severe. What the effects will be, we will never know. Starvation is not something that kills people instantly. People eat roots and leaves, and they drag on for a while. And the effects of starvation may be the death of children born from malnourished mothers a year or two from now, and all sorts of consequences. Furthermore, nobody's going to look, because the West is not interested in such things, and others don't have the resources. There are plenty of examples of that. So in August 1998, Clinton bombed the Sudan, destroyed half of its pharmaceutical supplies and the factory that produced them. The consequences there are unknown. A few attempts to estimate the total death toll are in the neighborhood of tens of thousands of people in German embassy in Sudan by a few independent investigators who have looked. Actually, I've been reading stuff carefully because nobody cares.
Oh, yeah, you
It's not important.
I'm going to come back or send you the link to that one.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah, you just go to YouTube.
Something comparable, though probably on a considerably greater scale, is unfolding right in front of us at this moment. What the consequences will be, we do not know, and probably will never know in detail. But what we know is that these are the expectations on which Western civilization is relying as it relates to its plans. And only those who are entirely ignorant of modern history will be surprised about the justifications provided by the educated classes. These are important topics that I'll reluctantly put aside for lack of time.
I never want to see anything like that in my life as long as I should live. It's terrible. Yes, I saw it go down. I was not in I just got off the 35 bus. 235 bus because I take it to work. Next to the old 22. No, when those things go, it just quiver. You know, like the wind, something quiver from the wind, it quivers. And it turns nose down, and nose down, of course, I saw it going nose down.
No, someone.
And then
So
the
once I started
flame,
talking on the show, people started bringing me
I
stuff.
thought maybe about
So
thought
this person brought me this.
it did,
So I just added
you
it
know,
to
like
it.
an explosion.
Because I didn't know how else
That's what
to
you
do
can
it.
see fire.
It made sense,
When it
right?
hit
It all
it,
fit under
the
one
fire,
rubric.
everything was like an explosion.
So you saw something hit the plane, you think,
Yeah,
or
that's a good plane.
but did you see
I
pieces
saw a box
falling
stop,
from
stop,
the?
a big thing that dropped. That was the first thing that dropped from the plane. I don't know what it was, but there was something on the end of it, and that part was in the plane. What it was, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why the jumpers were
From the plane, both people.
because they were
I was 116, so I just got off the bus. I got off the bus on 117th Street, and I was on 116th Street. What's your name, ma'am? My name is Geraldine Boston. Geraldine, B as in boy, Boston.
How old are you, ma'am?
I'm 74.
Where do you live?
I live in Brooklyn.
That's a very heavy decision to make.
Do Americans really believe they are a chosen people? Why should God bless America? God bless America? God bless America? Only America?
My killing them won't return her life, right? So how will our destruction of a tiny country bring out them back? It won't at all, in truth. I think we have demeaned their deaths. by our pathetic and brutal bombings, all under that slogan, God bless America. We cry out for peace, shooting at M16, praying that our killing be deemed okay because we are defending our way of life, not Canada's or England, not even Russia's way of life is of concern to us Americans, only ours. No, I do not give my permission for anyone to kill or hurt another. When it is time for this body to cease function, then so be
There
it,
is only one race.
for I know that I will live again.
You would have met my father, you would have been like, yeah, that's your father, because he was,
The Creator has said it,
his skin was not.
and so it shall be.
Yeah, I'm white, but you know.
Having mourned the distant deaths of so many, invisible to others, makes us tougher in the presence of deaths now so visible to the ones around us. Having said that, I am, of course, no exception to the feelings of depression and the questioning of direction so many of us are experiencing. However, below the fragile surface of the current water, there is a strong current, thousands of lives and years deep, and in that current I am strong, for I know with whom I stand.
Been scary here. Paranoia, never a stranger to me, has been visiting a little too much lately. Thanks so much for the note during what has become a time without equal in my experience. Riots in Caracas and Bangkok have nothing on the terror I feel these days. Between the suffering that has been wrought by, quote, my, unquote, government, and that of the folks who did this. Frightened at the outcome when the largest Islamic country, Indonesia, has declared jihad against the US in the event of actions taken against Afghanistan. Bio, chem, geno, nuke, take your pick. It's all shit. Why can we not see the folly of our grandfathers? We can dream better worlds and had better get to it before our cousins destroy the place. Hope you are well and making beauty.
I have to tell you that the only time I cried in all this crisis was when I, all of a sudden, could hear C's voice on the phone. I was reminded how close you guys are to it and how fucking happy I was to know you have not been harmed by this act, which you have been trying to prevent for years. I cannot imagine what it must be like to see something so huge, and I wonder what you are thinking from moment to moment. Instead of hearing the stories of the people on the news, I am thinking about being behind your eyes, about how you must comfort a child. I know that by being yourselves, both of you are able to rationalize some of the reasons why this happened, but not ever believing that anything could be so important. What will you be like? Something in you always have this to carry? Will you be wounded? Being so close to something of that magnitude, it must indeed seem like an act of war. I wonder if it is. Being so close, you must know if it feels like everything we know has changed. It seems so small, but I just want you to know how much I love you and how much a difference you have made in my life. For loving me and for accepting me, for helping me to get calmer and become happy after all these years. For playing with me when I was young, and for laughing about everything. I want you to keep laughing. I want you not to have lost something. But maybe that is because I do not want to have lost something myself. I am so lucky that I have not lost you.
Building 12 buildings is a dumbass. I don't understand why we just keep building. No, we're just weird. Things are weird. We're fat. We don't have the phallic. Like the thing. Some sort of like. You know what I mean? Congress gives us all a raise despite the crisis.
Yeah, nobody was responsible, right? Like you said, we were thinking, no one got fired.
biggest failure of intelligence in the history of intelligence. And I don't know what you do in a situation like that. In my country, they would have been, heads would have rolled. In India, heads would have rolled if you tried something like that. Okay, let me see what else I got going on here, audio-wise.
Do you read a lot?
Huh?
Do you read a lot?
Yes. I'm a good reader. Always have been.
And you went to college for journal?
No, I did a thing called Plan 2, which is a degree at UT. If you keep it above a 3.5 GPA, you can make your own degree program. So I did political science, history, and art. UT Austin.
It's great, though, is that it's hard for me because I zone away from my art. I just zone into that. It's hard for me to, in a certain interest to be really involved in that. I'm one of those people that have that, once I skip this, and that's it. It's fall into that.
You folks.
Very focused. So it's good. Yeah. But like I started looking at those emails, I started.
Sometimes students,
Yeah,
it's too much information. There's no real way to present this that makes sense. So I kind of have just been doing this, you know. When they're in the binders, you can sit there flipping through the binder, but I mean, come on, it's just too much information. You know what I mean? Like, it's just too much information.
And I wonder what this guy, every day I wonder what, every year, sorry, I wonder what.
Until this day,
Yeah.
totally. Or Cheney for that matter.
Cause you, come on, man, you know it for a fact. That's why I brought it up. I hate to be this way, but in that video that came up, the reaction of the, when they go into that school, they whispered his ear.
Well, he lied about the whole thing twice. He told reporters that he had seen the first plane hit the tower. There was no video of the first plane hitting the tower until 2 days later, the non-Negros footage. So he said he was in the limousine and he heard and he'd seen the plane hit the tower. Then he went into the room and started reading the book, the goat book, to the kids. And then you have that slow motion, weird reaction. Almost as if he knew already, but, you know, it had
But he didn't go to ground zero until a week later, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's in here somewhere, I'm sure.
I was reading, or maybe it was this when I was sitting here, and then I sat over there, and I sat here, and then Steve was here, and I was reading over there, and I was like, all these stations.
Yeah, it's nutty.
It's like,
A lot of material.
and you soak, like I'm a sponge. And you just soak it up, so.
18 years ago today, I mean, will we ever really understand it?
I don't think so. But if you had a time machine and you went back into time and you figure out a way to not make this happen or
Prevent it.
prevent it, sorry, would it make things different than what it is today?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, this was taken as that's the crime here to us who are pacifists and did not want to react to the war. The whole crime is that you used our grief, you used our mourning, you used those feelings that we were going through to a political end. It reminds me of when, so the nation wakes up and, oh my God, the Japanese have bombed an island of Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. And then he gets up and he's, okay, it's time to go to war in Germany. Wait, what? wait. The Japanese bombed us over here. Okay, we gotta go to war in Germany. And so it was a politically, and I don't know if you know this, but it's now proven that FDR and the Navy knew days before Pearl Harbor happened, that was going to happen. And they said nothing because he needed an excuse to get into the war in Europe. We now know this. So those number of people who died that day, you ask them, did they have to die, right? Could I go back in time and stop it from happening? Would things change? Well, yeah, things would change. Right? So in the same way, this happened, and that's what the big time pitch is all about. They went on TV.
You think they're gonna find it? They're gonna find
You
out.
saw this, right? This is the big, I call this the big time pitch. That's what they did. All in a row, bang, 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 right? It's called the big time pitch. You wake up on Sunday morning, the whole nation's still fucked. We don't even know what's going on. And right in a row, right? Cheney on Russert, then Rumsfeld live outside ABC, then Rumsfeld in ABC, then Ashcroft, then Powell, and they dictate exactly what's going to happen now. We're going to go to war, we're going to go to war. It's Iraq. What the fuck Iraq are they going to do this? We're going to go do this next, Afghanistan. I mean, the policymakers use things that happen to us for their own interests, and they justify it to us because we are in a state of shock. And so we go, okay, yeah, go to Germany, attack Hitler. Okay, yeah, go to Afghanistan and bomb Afghanistan. And that's complete, there's no bearing. If you're a pacifist like I am, when something horrifying happens like this near your head, you immediately become loving. Steve kept talking about a knee-jerk reaction. I did not have a knee-jerk reaction. I'm a grown, mature man. If someone hits me in the face, I don't hit them back. I go, whoa, hey, what's going on? Let's not hit. And instead of that, which would have been a mature, responsible act, let's care for ourselves. Let's find out why they even got attacked. Why do they hate us? Let's ask questions. We didn't do any of that. We used it as an opportunity to go get oil from Iraq and to kill people all over the Middle East who had nothing to do with this. Nobody in Afghanistan had anything to do with this. Bin Laden had nothing to do with this. The FBI in 2006 took Bin Laden off the most wanted list and said, he's not the perpetrator of this crime. The men of the 19 so-called men are alive walking around. They named 19 guys, and then a week later, one of them is in Saudi Arabia going, no, I'm here. I didn't die in a plane. He's alive. Then 4 other guys.
Something's fishy.
The whole thing's fishy. I would spend time at that station, bro. You should listen to those people. It's pretty intense, man. I would listen to those folks. Because there's a lot to be said for the inside job crew, you know. And they feel very alone, I guarantee you. Everybody thinks they're nuts.
They think they're nuts?
You know? And they believe that they see it for what it is, you know. That's a very heavy thing to live with. It's like John F. Kennedy. I know for sure Oswald didn't kill Kennedy, but we can't say it. The bullet's from the front. There's no way for the book depository up there that his head goes backwards, man.
Yeah, because you're back. I mean, he's just...
So 1963, we're still telling that lie, right?
Have you seen that show on Netflix called The Family?
Uh-uh.
Oh my god.
Pretty good?
It's all about... It's about...
So there's 3 right there, okay? You have, you know about the sinking of the Maine? Okay, so the Spanish-American War can't jump off because there's no reason to attack Spain. So military guys here want it to happen, just like they wanted Vietnam to happen, which is why the argument is that they killed Kennedy. But they can't make it happen. Well, there's a ship called the Maine that's parked off the coast of, in the Gulf, you know. And in those days, these ships had boilers with like coal, like burning shit in them to keep the thing going. Well, that stuff would ignite commonly. And so it ignited and the Maine sank. But the newspapers blamed Spain. All the newspapers in America agreed we're just going to blame Spain, say Spain did it.
So we get attacked.
Yes, and hence the beginning of the Spanish-American War. So the policymakers just made it up, you know. So there's evidence of this happening over and over again. Sooner or later, you have to ask yourself whether the real story is the real story, you know. The lens with which we look at JFK has changed so much from the days after it happened. But if you were a guy who was 28 years old, and you were in Dallas, or you were in Missouri, and you heard this had happened, and the president had been killed, and there was this lone nut and you were asking yourself, hey, how come there's no judge, there's no jury, they didn't even look, they just grabbed this guy, sentenced him, and took him, and then he got killed. There are guys, I'm sure, and women who feel that's not what happened. But now you just have to live in America where that's what happened.
The history books are not saying the truth.
Well, I mean, that's one argument. But it's one way to put it. But my point is that people are just living in a country now, every day going to their jobs, going, Oswald killed Kennedy, Oswald killed Kennedy, Oswald killed Kennedy, even if you don't believe it. Or, okay, the kamikaze surprise attack, kamikaze surprise attack, kamikaze surprise attack. Then you find out they knew 2 days earlier, right? Or you find out the Maine was sunk by accident, and Spain had nothing to do with it, you know?
Wait a minute, so are we gonna find out about this? That this is
That's what you're watching. If you watch that, that's what they're saying. They're point blank saying this was implosion of the towers with explosives. That's why they fell straight down. The 7 was not hit. The owner of the buildings took them over in June before this happened, and then recouped twice the insurance.
what?
Yeah. There's a lot of fishy stuff, man. So you can't talk about it because everybody looks at you like a wingman. So what I did was I grouped all that stuff into one thing, and I grouped the pure observation into another thing, and in the hopes that we can all just look at it and come to some more honest conclusions than Bin Laden did this, let's go bomb Saddam, which has nothing to do with what's happening in the context. You know? And again, it abuses the mourning. The mourning that we were going through, the grief that we were going through, has been abused, which is sad.
It's so sad though, like all the innocent people that suffer.
Oh yeah, man. We're still at war. How are we still at war, man? I mean, that's just amazing to me.
Because remember what they say, right? War is profitable.
Well, that's true. So when do we ever get free of it?
I know, right?
Hey, Mark.
It is said a rich braggart once took a Sufi on a tour of his enormous house. At the end, he asked, "What impressed you most of all?" The Sufi answered, "The fact that the earth is strong enough to support the weight of such a massive building."
So this is This is in the immediate days after the attacks, as I was listening to people react in a military fashion. When we talk about the knee-jerk reaction or the vengeance, etc., I wanted to compose a series of anti-war messages within days. So this is September 16th through the 25th. And I composed them into a small book, which was called AWM, so it looks like that. And this booklet, zine, if you will, I created an agency, a fictional agency called the Balas Agency, and named a guy called Raj Balas, who's a character I invented. And he was the publisher of these documents, was the idea, as though he had found them from someone else. So this is how it worked. In September of 2001, the New York office of the Balas Agency, representatives of artists, writers, and other creatives, received a series of anti-war texts from a client and distributed them as directed to press outlets, academic institutions, and selected individuals. The author of these essays was murdered in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, September 27th, 2001, between the hours of 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. 5 typewritten essays, each numbered and titled AWM, were hand-delivered by messenger to the Balas Agency, beginning the evening of Sunday, September 16th, through Monday, the 25th of September, so just 14 days after the attacks. A few hours after the author of these works was pronounced dead, AWM number 6 arrived at the offices of the Balas Agency posthumously. The envelope had been mailed by city post the day before. Experts have authenticated the 6 documents to the same source, the deceased. NYPD investigations into the killing remain open. No suspects have been taken into custody. No material witnesses have been detained. The Balas Agency offices in New York were closed April 15th of 2002 after recording massive losses in the final financial quarter of 2001. All original work protected under copyright, all rights reserved. So this was the first one of them. September 16th, the anti-war movement, 8 o'clock in the evening. At this point, the anti-war effort is attempting to establish a unified, broad coalition of interested parties who are of the same mind on the following issues. 1, because all evidence against suspects in the WTC incident is circumstantial. 2, because this nation's justice system is founded on the principle of due process. 3, because rescue and recovery require time, debris considerably more, and grieving has just begun. 4, because arrests and charges have not yet been made public, and a grand jury has not yet fairly been convened. 5, because Osama bin Laden has denied involvement in the WTC collapse, and the U.S. federal government has yet to disclose sufficient intelligence to justify the accusation of a link to any one suspect. And 6, because many citizens and non-citizens of the U.S. alike disapprove of American acts of aggression overseas that would be detrimental to innocent civilians. We, the members of the anti-war movement, demand an end to all U.S. acts of aggression until a full investigation into the events of Tuesday, September 11, 2001 has been completed. It is our concern that the executive and legislative branches of the United States government are acting in a foreign theater without the consent of a willing majority of the United States, of the Americas, of the world. Many of the population urge restraint and no retaliation, at least until several things occur. 1, rescue and recovery, disposal of debris. 2, a criminal investigation. 3, full intelligence disclosure prior to acts of war or aggression on foreign soil. 4, clarity of purpose in armed conflict. Clarity of purpose in armed conflict, I wrote 5 days after, and Iraq is where we ended up over the next 5 years. So these zines, 2 of them, are in all the major collections that collected my work at the time. So Stanford, the Getty, and MoMA, the Library of Congress, Fales collection, the Athenaeum, Corcoran. So in a way, I feel that I've captured some things and they exist and they'll be permanently archived. But in another way, they seem completely immaterial. The world moved on. The Bush-Cheney doctrine that we're still enduring has us living under surveillance after the Patriot Act, total information awareness. We're at constant war. Constant war. Heavy stuff. That was a slap tag I made back in 2002. And that's how it felt. It felt like they were telling us war is peace. And
a lot of my experience in education is through the establishment, and so a lot of this is really hard for me to discover, but that actually, I didn't do much of the Pentagon.
the spectacle of horror. And somebody found themselves in the cockpit of a massive jetliner filled with explosive processed drugs in the middle of the bitter power struggle for oil. And he floored it in the name of Allah or his conception of art with unflappable purpose. And soon his compatriot, inspired and encouraged by the act, followed, and the two flying bombs laid waste to the tallest concrete, steel, and glass buildings to ever dominate the biggest cityscape on earth. New York City was unveiled. It felt scripted. It felt scripted. Bigotry in words.
Were you skeptical in the initial days? Did you become skeptical as time passed? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about your feelings about why it brought us along. It doesn't matter whether they went back to one way or the other. It's so extent to which they have been oppressing and they decided to get people around the world, not just in the Middle East, but in Latin America, South America. So it's not just people in the Middle East who are suspicious and hate the United States government. I think it's most people in the world. And for those people,
I'm running out of steam here, Mark. I wonder if I should.
What happened with Israel when this happened?
Maybe.
When this happened, I thought, did Israel get all freaked out? They were going to be next. They were going to be,
Some people think that
that now 10 years down the road, that there are more people who are growing interested in investigating this, like the skeptics are calling for, because of the possibility of complicity by the United States government? Or do you think that more of your fellow New Yorkers, people kind of just want to go away and don't want to pay attention to it? Which of these two say, or yeah, the difference is people want to go away. But I think that what will often where I think the biggest question they expect from the government is how many more times American people are allowed to relax and the government is really And do you teach these kinds of things as well as a teacher? And have you had anybody hassle you about that, or have any problems with your view being presented to others in this in the city or in this country?
Not yet. Not yet. With tomorrow may hold. However, I just, like I say, I teach math. And math is about interrelationship
They were all there.
between
They came for the convention.
places and things, and I always try to integrate that into
You never believe who's next.
the context of which I teach. I can't teach in the
And
vacuum.
who's next?
It doesn't make any
Alex
difference whether
Jones.
people know mathematics or whether
He's a
they train
crazy
very
nut.
well
Yeah.
to be just
But this is before he was a crazy nut.
wheel, so to
He's
speak.
real, like,
So I try to
comes on that Joe
at least give
Rogan,
my students some appreciation
podcast.
of
Fucking
mathematics
up,
and the
man.
He's a
appreciation of
nut.
the world in which they live, so that they can become more, I would say, powerful citizens, so that they can, because actually it's all about control. I think the key thing is control. People have lost control of the government. People have lost control of their lives. So It's just a matter about associating locally as far as starting with yourself, taking control of your own life and taking control of the people who make policy.
And do you have hope that the United States, or people living in the United States, will do this, and that and we could see some change in the future?
Well, I think it's an indication of that right now. You know, again, it's becoming more and more difficult for people who have the wool pulled over their eyes by the media, you know, by the government, just about people that are working on behalf of the government. We find out now that the government is controlling more about news services. They're paying people to project certain images into our minds. Yes, I think things will come to a head. And in fact, I look forward to it. In fact, that's the only way you're going to have real change. Sometimes, you know, you hope that change will be positive and that people will be able to live better lives. But again, that doesn't always happen. So it's really about people taking control of themselves and controlling those who say they represent people.
I wanted to first get from you an impression, say, from September 11th, 5 years ago to today, about that growth. Has it been growing a great deal? And have you seen people getting hip and this tipping point that people talk about? Do you see it impending?
Well, I do, and it's exponentially growing. The people have found out that the official story is a lie, and I've just seen explosive growth the last year. Every month, it's exponentially speeding up. So there is an epiphany or a paradigm shift happening right now with people learning the truth about 9/11.
But also to look at power in a new way. Do you think Americans, as a result of doing this with the 9/11 topic, could actually, do you see any hope for the United States getting back what it once had and a real kind of leadership, meaningful leadership?
It wasn't America that did this. It was criminals using the United States as an engine of domination. And so the world will look on us good and we will get the love of the world back. We stop being a corrupt empire. We admit that criminals have seized control of us and remove them. You know, Germany today is a good country. At least it was better than it was under Hitler. We don't entirely blame the Germans for Hitler. We're trying to stop Bush and his cronies before it gets to Hitlerian proportions.
What do you think is the priority for this movement, taking it to the next sort of level? My
continual path is to wake people up. We have the majority of Americans, 68% in the Zogby poll, do not trust the government, believe there's a cover-up. 42% of that same Zogby poll believing it's a pure inside job. Scripps Howard News Service, 36% believe it's an inside job. And a lot of people get a poll call. They're not going to say, I believe the government did it, even if they thought it did. We've experienced that talking to people on the street, but later they'll tell you when the camera's off, they think it is. So the real numbers, I believe, are about double that. Also done thousands of radio interviews around the country. Found that the majority of people are awake. It's much higher than 50% now. But the polls also bear that out. But I believe our job is not done yet. Just simply exposing it, having the people realize it, then shifts their paradigm and gets them out of fear of some phony Al-Qaeda into the fear of who they should be fearing, the real people, criminals in our government, so we can then wake up and take action against them. But I would like to bring them to justice, and I believe we can bring them to justice. But it's like getting Al Capone on tax evasion. We can get them on no-bid contracts. We get them on lying about Iraq, or we can get them about lying to Congress, or get them on some other issue, just get them out of there. I will take that as well, because it's so hard. Even if people know it's an inside job, it's so hard for the country itself and the world itself to move and then actually remove these criminals from the system. But we are working towards that, and that could happen. But most certainly we can expose them publicly in public opinion to where they are just unable to govern and are removed.
Who do you look to in America for leadership at a time like this?
People always talk about speaking truth to power. And then that's important, to let them know we're aware of their criminal activities. But more than that, we need to speak truth to the people and empower the people to take action with our buying habits, with who we support, with who we talk to. Here's an example. 2 years ago, the police down there were pretty mean to me. This year, most of the police were nodding and saying, good job. And hey, Alex, like what you do. I mean, high-level ones, captains and people, when they saw the camera turn away, they go, hey, I'm a big fan. Appreciate what you're doing. It happened over and over again today.
Wow, in New York.
Yeah, so there's a shift with those guys, too.
Do you take this as a duty, what you do? What motivates you in this process to be so committed?
Well, if you've ever been in a fist fight back in high school, once the fight starts, you're not really thinking about it. I'm committed to this. I'm going 100%. I'm not even thinking about winning. I know we're going to win if we just fight hard enough. We don't have a choice. I mean, these are really diabolical people in control. So I would feel more insecure not fighting. And I value my life. I love life. But if they just knock me down and they crush me, That's the way it is.
He
You know,
denied
that's
Sandy
why
Hook.
we have what we have. We owe the dead people who came before us who made sacrifices.
It
So I'm just trying to
really
follow in that
messed up.
tradition of being a human being. I don't even call it courage. It's I see evil people, they must be resisted. I am
Was he
resisted.
Republican?
And we are here at Cooper Union on this Sunday, the 10th of September 2006, just a few hours away from the 5th anniversary of that fateful morning here in New York and in points south and north, Boston Logan Airport, Washington, D.C., and of course, somewhere over Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where these attack events took place in the United States 5 years ago. And tonight, here at Cooper Union, all day and all evening for the last 6 or 7 hours, the 9/11 Truth community, represented by a number of speakers and attendees, have been meeting here to discuss independent investigation, alternative theories about what happened on that fateful Tuesday morning. Tomorrow morning, many people from here are expecting to go down to Ground Zero, the former World Trade Center site, and wearing black t-shirts with white writing that read "Investigate 9/11. They are going to encourage people who are at Ground Zero to reconsider the evidence that there may have been other authors of this event, not Osama bin Laden, not Al-Qaeda, or perhaps maybe those agents working in complicity with members of the United States government, of the Mossad, Israeli intelligence, or other agencies which have not been mentioned, not covered, and certainly not investigated by the 9/11 Commission. From Cooper Union, I am MT Karthik for Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
Did you work for the news?
Not then.
So professional.
I did do it I did
Oh
radio
my
for
God.
years,
I'm
but
doing it
but
tomorrow,
not at
even
this time.
before I'm
I just
elected.
made this for the
Thanks so much for
project.
joining.
Thank
Listen
you.
to this next guy. This guy's amazing.
My name's Alfonso Shesky, and I'm with Veterans for 9/11 Truth. Our whole purpose and reason for being is to investigate. We want to investigate our government for participation in 9/11. We take a solemn oath to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. So it's our duty to investigate, and then if we find that these folks are guilty of the crimes of 9/11, then we feel that we should arrest them. We're to defend the Constitution, regardless of who violates it. In other words, if there was a coup d'etat in this country, like there is right now, it would be incumbent upon veterans and active duty people to stop it from happening.
Can I ask you, you were a member of which, sir?
I was an Army.
And did you serve abroad?
Yep, Vietnam, war veteran.
And you co-founded this group when?
On May 15th, 2006.
So this is a new group.
It's brand new.
Do you find that there are a lot of people in your organization who I'm assuming have military experience who seem to think that the events of that day show or belie intuitively a kind of involvement by U.S. American military?
I think that somebody with military experience was involved in the explosions. Building 7, free fall collapsed. Free fall collapsed with no resistance whatsoever, at the same rate of speed that you would expect if you dropped something in a vacuum. The only way to accomplish the symmetrical free fall collapse is to make all the steel in the building lose all its strength all at once. Fires can't do that. The building is not hit by any airplanes. The only way known to man to do that is with some kind of exotic cutter charges, like a thermite, something like that. So, yeah, is there military involved? There was certainly military involved in the stand down in NORAD. They did not, I repeat, they did not abide by the well-established FAA protocol for air emergencies. They just didn't get it done.
Are there a lot of members in your group yet? What's your size?
100.
Veterans from all around the country, or?
All around the country, even all around the world. Just about every rank from colonel all the way down to private. Some active duty military as well. It's a crime to commit treason, to murder your own citizens, to create pretexts for invasions, illegal invasions of countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. Those are all treasonous acts that violate not just international law, but U.S. law. And being in the military or being a veteran, you have a solemn duty to resist or even arrest the people who are giving illegal orders based upon usurpation of power by means of a false flag operation.
And can you say a few words about, I assume you stand behind him, Lieutenant Watada, and his current struggle?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I am telling our military to do, is lay down their arms. Don't take orders. Resist, 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 and if possible, arrest the criminals.
And tell me, please, do you have a website, and where can people learn more about your group?
Yep, it's Veterans for 9/11 Truth. Our website is quite simple. It's V911T. That's Victor 911 Tango for militarypeople.org. It's full of information about 9/11, and it's all factual and can be verified in public record. We don't have to theorize or make things up. There's plenty of facts to support the things that we believe are true, and that's all we need. We don't have any theories.
And in the 5 years that you've been looking into this material, would you say that, I mean, we had the 9/11 Commission, which clearly seems to be problematic for a lot of people for what it left out and how much it didn't do to cover this material. Do you feel that the numbers are growing of people who are concerned about this? Or do you think that a lot of people feel like, you know, why are we doing this? It's 5 years later. Why can't we just let this go? Which of those do you see? Maybe you could talk a little bit about.
What I decided to do, since I knew on 9/12, I knew that it was an inside job and that NORA stood down that they did not abide by FAA protocol. So I thought, now what do I do? Well, I've got to shout this truth out. I've got to tell people. And if enough people know about the truth, then you reach what I would call a critical mass, where you're an oddball if you don't believe the truth about 9/11. And that's the point we're reaching now, according to a recent Zogby poll. 70 million American adults want to have a new investigation. That's 44% of the adult population. That's strong. And we did this projection or proliferation of the truth by means of grassroots organizing via the internet. We have the internet, so we communicated with each other. We got other people to take a look at the evidence, and it's growing very, very fast now. I think that we've reached critical mass. It's getting bigger and bigger. You have organizations like Scholars for 9/11 Truth getting on C-SPAN, getting on mainstream MSN, and so forth. I've been on a lot of radio shows. I have my own radio show too. That's one of the things I created in an effort to, to offset this great big horrendous lie with the truth. And we plan to shout out the truth until the truth becomes the truth.
And is your priority then a criminal pathway to justice, or like a grand jury, or?
Yes. I'd like to see it treated as a crime, investigated as a crime, and I would like the investigators to be outside of the government, because you see here, the government's the suspect. You can't have the suspect investigating their own crime.
Which is exactly what happened.
Which is what the 9/11 Commission has done. They all had conflicts of interest. I won't go into the details of it, but they were all associated with.
Oh, what do you mean? They believe they're right. I mean,
war in Afghanistan.
It's been going on a long time.
It'd have to be a panel whose interests are not conflicted, that have nothing but justice and truth in mind, not politics. We don't want to politicize like the 9/11 Commission was. I mean, the 9/11 Commission actually believed that high-ranking NORAD officials were lying to them and turned this information over to the Department of Justice. And what did they do? Nothing. That's what we don't want. That's what we don't want. That's why we don't want the government doing it, because they will do nothing. Because they don't want to. Of course, they don't want. I mean, these are high crimes. They're not just misdemeanors. This is treason. These things could be penalized with firing squad, hanging, or something.
Guy seems pretty sober, right? I mean, he doesn't sound like a nutbag.
These folks to be caught.
I interviewed all these people because I wanted to hear them.
Guilty, and then made an example of
You know what I mean?
So that future executive officers in our government abide by our laws.
My name is Marcy J. Gordon. I'm from right here in Manhattan. In fact, I live 3/4 of a mile from Ground Zero when it happened, and still live in that neighborhood.
So you were a witness there?
Well, I watched it on TV, but felt the ground. I mean, the neighborhood looked like a volcano exploded. A friend of mine was working at 100 Church Street, and they weren't allowed to go anywhere, and he was calling me because he was so upset about witnessing people jumping out of the windows on fire. So yeah, it impacted me. There were, I think, 8 people from my local firefighters, engine and ladder company, that were killed because they were one of the very first groups on the scene.
Were you skeptical from the very beginning of government explanations and descriptions of things that were happening, or is this something that you have come to after some time, some of the ideas that were presented here today, for example?
I knew right away. In fact, as we watched it, I looked at my husband and I said, that's a controlled demolition. Those airplanes didn't bring down those buildings. And a friend of mine, activist friend of mine, called me on September 11th to see if I was okay. And he said, it's the burning of the Reichstag. I said, you're exactly right. That's what it is. I knew right away it was a false flag operation. I'm 50 years old. I've been studying conspiracy theory for over 30 years. So I know there's something to it. I can see the hallmarks of it over and over and over again. It was obvious to me from day one.
In the 5 years since these attacks, obviously there's a lot of opinion in this country about what happened, and a lot of public product that even these days, usually around the event, that we watch and see. Has it been difficult for you to sort of hold these opinions? Do you make sort of an effort to teach or convince others about them? And do you think that the numbers of people who are skeptical are growing?
I've been an activist since I was a child, so I've never been afraid to say what I think, and I was speaking out from day one, and I was called the most horrible things and excoriated by people who now have been saying to me, you know, I'm beginning to think you were right. Yes, I talk about it all the time. Just a few weeks ago, I was on vacation in Jamaica, and I was at a spa with some other New Yorkers. Intelligent, educated people, but people who get a lot of their news from mainstream media, not people like myself who spend 2 to 4 hours a day reading from alternative sources. And when I said to these people, look, certain things about it just don't add up. Jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel. There were traces of thermite found. Thermite can only be obtained by military contractors. Civilian contractors and firefighters cannot get their hands on it. It's clearly a controlled demolition. Several firefighters said that they heard explosions. They reported that the fire was out on the 87th floor of the World Trade Tower, and then they heard the explosions. This was suppressed. These firefighters were not allowed to testify at the 9/11 cover-up commission, the Kane Commission, which, of course, if you look closely at the credentials of all of the people on the commission, every one of them had ties to the defense and or oil industries.
The scale of that is big. Are we talking about 50, 100 people at the highest levels of government who may have been in the know on this?
I don't know how many there were, but I'd certainly love to know why the SEC dropped their investigations as to the suspicious numbers of puts and calls on airlines and various other and oil industries. That when they discovered that it was not foreigners who placed those trades, all of a sudden it was a non-story. I bet you would find that it goes back to the CIA.
The evidence is very interesting, certainly now, 5 years into this. Enough people have been meeting like this to bring up some very specific points about physical evidence, as you pointed out, as well as some of the sort of circumstantial evidence that you're also describing. As a New Yorker, you can tell us whether or not you signed the petition, but maybe you could just speak more directly to Elliot Spitzer and the DA's office. What would you say to them with this stack of what you see as evidence? What would you ask of them in this regard?
Well, this is a crime. It was clearly a crime, and it's a crime where the evidence was covered up. I mean, when Flight 800 happened, the government spent $40 million looking at every piece of that airplane. But when 9/11 happened, Rudolph Giuliani ordered all of the steel infrastructure from the Trade Center shipped overseas, melted down and shipped overseas. That's a cover-up. That's a cover-up of evidence. Clearly, something does not add up to any thinking person.
But do you think we can convince our local authorities, like our DAs and prosecutors, to take this seriously?
No, they're all part of it.
So how do you go about what is next? What do you prioritize as a member of this movement in order to affect some justice or change?
Well, we have to keep speaking about it. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep assembling in groups. One of the speakers here today, a lawyer by the name of William Pepper, said what we need to do is go down and camp out in front of the Washington Monument and just camp out like Cindy Sheehan camped out in Crawford and let them know we're not going away until we get some answers. Lydia Vasquez, who's from this neighborhood, has committed to introducing legislation in Congress to call for an independent commission, investigative commission, no ties to the government. And other speakers in this room were calling for a commission to be composed of not only experts, but people, because there were no scientific experts on the Kane Commission, real scientific experts, people with knowledge of physics and mechanical engineering and materials, but also for some of the families, because really it was the families of the victims who've been most instrumental in pushing for the truth to come out, because they know that the evidence didn't add up. And they want the truth, and we should all support them in that. To honor the dead, what better way to honor the dead than to bring out the truth of how and why they died? Because it's a number one rule of police work that the number one suspect for any crime are the people who had the most benefited from it. On September 10th, George Bush had less than 40% of support among world leaders. Okay, what happened on September 11th?
Yeah, my name is Scott Sen. I'm from just west of Atlantic City, New Jersey, South Jersey.
And where were you on the morning of September 11th?
I was at my place of business. I was watching it while I ran up to my apartment and I saw it on TV.
And, you're an attendee to this conference today?
Yes, I am. Proudly.
Tell us a little bit about what you wanted to speak about as physical evidence.
Yeah, first what got me on that day was the fact that no fighters intercepted any of these planes. I mean, the second plane hit the South Tower at 9:03. So even if you give the first plane pilot error, say, 9:15, at 9:03 we were definitely under a terrorist attack. And yet, 45 minutes later, the strategic military command of the country is hit. You see? And so that makes no sense. That's what tipped me off, that there had to be some sort of a stand-down order. And then, of course, there's Building 7 that I got hip to. No thanks to the mainstream media, though. And no thanks to the 9/11 Commission report, by the way, that did not even mention Building 7 in its final report, as if the inexplicable implosion of a 500-foot office building was not even worth mentioning in the official comprehensive account of that day.
So you were skeptical from the very beginning, and your skepticism has been reinforced, which
Oh yeah, well, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the physical evidence is physical evidence. Let's take the tower, say the North Tower. The government says that the steel gave way, and the top part of the tower fell into the bottom, and then it pancaked down. That's what they say happened. But that's impossible. The main point is that each tower and Building 7 fell at free fall speed. You see, and that's known, it's accepted. Even the 9/11 Commission has said that both buildings fell in roughly 10 seconds. Now, but that's free fall speed. So in other words, sir, if you were to take a super helicopter and pull that 200-foot section of that top building up to 12,000 feet with a helicopter and let it go, it would fall to the ground through the air in 10 seconds.
Yeah, I put all that back there because
But it didn't fall through the ground.
This is actual.
It fell into the bottom part of the building, which is much heavier, which was 1,000 feet, very healthy. So my question is to anybody, how does the top part of the building fall through the bottom part of the building at the speed of falling through air? The bottom part of the building was not air, you see. So what happened to the resistance? It was taken out. It's classic controlled demolition. Classic controlled demolition.
Okay, let's take a look at this from a more practical viewpoint in terms of the politics then. Let's say you look at that and you say, well, that means there were, as Dr. Jones may have just presented, cutter charges in the building, and someone must have placed them there in order for this to happen. The scale of this, given the government line for the last 5 years, how many people walk around you in the world believing one thing about what happened here in this town 5 years ago, is pretty immense. How have you felt in this 5 years, and how does it make you feel now? Do you think it's really possible to bring people to an understanding of this, create an investigation, and achieve change around this issue of September 11th?
I believe that there is, and I believe it's because the physical evidence speaks for itself. That's what's going to carry this, and that's what's gotten me, and is what's woken up a lot of people with this. It's just the raw physical evidence involved. And then you take that to the next level and you see, well, there has to be more going on. I don't quite know what's going to happen. Maybe the conspirators will get scared, and maybe they'll try some other false flag operation to get everybody's mind off what happened. I don't think that's possible because too many people are hip to this now. So, I mean, we're approaching 40% of the country. Like the Time magazine article said, that's no small number. That is a mainstream political reality right now. So I think that the people that pulled off 9/11 would have to take that mood of the public into consideration. You know, they've lost their grip. They've lost their, you know, their mesmerizing grip that they've had on at least 40% of the country. But again, it comes down to the physical evidence. If you take an honest, non-emotional look at the physical evidence, it's very, very clear that the buildings came down, all 3 buildings came down from controlled demolition. And then you can get into the Pentagon too, and that's another story.
Oh, sorry.
I just hung up on my brother out of respect. I was like, bro,
That's
can't be on the
sweet.
phone.
Nice. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's more like for a month and you would be able to get through it all.
I know.
It's pretty ridiculous. So that's the book that we finally reproduced. If you pick it up, it's meant to be rotated. You'll see 2 bars on every page. When you get to a page, like you get to any given page, you'll see 2 bars on the page. That's where your thumb goes. So
I probably shouldn't hold this like.
no, you can, yeah, you can. Yeah. That's the whole point. It's a beautiful book. So if you look at, you see these 2 bars? That's where your thumb goes. Okay, and then as you turn the book, it's actually from this side. The front is this side. So as you're reading the book, the idea what we wanted was to make the book, you have to rotate it because it was supposed to represent the kind of chaotic situation you were in. So as you're reading this, put your thumb on wherever you see the 2 marks. So, okay. And this one is in most major collections in the country. That was our final piece. So that's at the Smithsonian, Library of Congress, and the MoMA, and the Getty, and all those places. Stanford.
Wait, that's somebody else.
That's me.
Okay, I'm thinking, that's not mine. Mine's here. Okay.
And this was the audio that goes with it. I'll play it for you while you're looking. So this disc came with the thing inside. I recorded all the artists here. I brought them into the studio and recorded them all, poets and artists and so on. It is said a rich braggart once took a Sufi on a tour of his enormous house. At the end, he asked, "What impressed you most of all?" The Sufi answered, "The fact that the earth is strong enough to support the weight of such a massive building."
Once upon a time. I moved here 5 years ago with 2 friends, Jan and Jana. In love with our new lives, we took the subway up to the Cloisters and down to Battery Park. We took the dangling tram across the river to Roosevelt Island. We kayaked the Hudson. We walked the Brooklyn Bridge. We took the elevator to the top of the World Trade Center one night. We couldn't afford the restaurant, but there was a place you could look out the window for free. The world we saw was blue and black and gold, wedges and columns of bright window and dark steel. Small but visible night shift men and women worked at their desks, framed and lit like Byzantine saints. The buildings blazed upward, lit with the sky and one another aloft. Far below, we saw tiny streets, the very names of which, in a gridded city of numbered blocks and avenues, seemed dim, threadlike, Dickensian. Old Slip, Plenty Slip, Thames, Vasey, Gouverneur, Aden Lane. From above, at night, they formed a dark filigree, a patina in which the luminous towers burned all the brighter. The whole thing made us limp with pleasure. When we had had our fill, we took the elevator down, looking up at the mirrored ceiling and twirling in circles, arms out. And each of us, in our own way, said this prayer to the city we had seen. Ravish my heart, take me with you. At first sight, I walked out of the Kmart and saw the sky, a perfect September blue, and crossing it, a cloud of black smoke, roiling right to left over Lafayette Street. The city couldn't have decided to burn poor Kate Millette out of her apartment on the Bowery because the smoke was blowing the wrong way, but something very near was on fire, judging from the amount of smoke. It's at Broadway and Houston, I guess, a block over and 8 down. Was the Angelica Theater burning? I looked around for an explanation. No one else was even looking up. Then a man walked quickly by, talking into his cell phone. A plane just crashed into the World Trade Center, he said. That's a sick joke, I thought, but I trotted after him and tugged his sleeve. Is it true? I asked. Yeah, he said, and kept moving. I had my copies to pick up, so I bought a hot chocolate and stayed where I was, under the black cube sculpture on Astor Place. Would anyone else notice the smoke? Most didn't. The early light fell on hundreds of faces as people thronged toward Broadway or poured downstairs to get on subways. Men with push brooms or briefcases, girls in their school uniforms. Campaigners dressed in their election day best passed out flyers for the mayoral primary. Guys in a van honked at guys in a car. Women jogged, adding those funny running-in-place steps at the crosswalks. And one college student, a throwback to 1999, pushed down Lafayette on her little silver scooter, sundress fluttering, young face dipped in sun like hot new glass. Astor Place was like a Hopper painting, its anomalous broad bright spaces teeming on this perfectly blue September day. A few people, mostly with cell phones, stared up at the blossoming horror. A few pointed. And one woman ran, throbbing down the block, her nice work scarf surging from side to side. I could see the whites of her eyes from across the street. Of course I had to pick up my copies. I was like the others, hostage to my so-called future. We were still swaddled in the old world, and she had burst through to the new. 2 seconds. After Sharon called, I went out to get food. When I left, the North Tower was standing, a body with a sawn-open chest and flaming heart. I heard the sirens screaming down 2nd Avenue and still trusted that the firefighters could save it. I bought a gallon of water, a liter of seltzer, frozen shrimp dumplings in case the stove and fridge still worked, a bag of edamame, 3 yogurts, 2 vegetable juices, 1 orange juice, a tub of cashew butter, a box of thin crisps, a Toblerone, fresh figs, and a box of candles. As I filled my baskets, I saw a very small child systematically touch every candy bar while a woman's urgent voice called, "Lucy, Lucy!" The woman finally apprehended her child with a quick shake. I turned my back for 2 seconds, and what happens? Like a bug-eyed, yuppie survivalist, I stood with my heavy baskets behind a man placidly buying a single bag of chips, Lucy and her mother buying a juice box and salad greens. I felt like that lone running woman on Astor Place. When I walked outside, 20 people were crowded on the sidewalk around a television, and someone was filming them. And when I went home, a man looked me in the eye without a leer. "Isn't this awful?" his face said. I felt singed by his compassion. And when I got to the top of the stairs and looked out the window, the North Tower was gone.
At breakfast yesterday, I watched metal fall from the sky like feathers. I must tell you that when I spoke with you, minutes after the towers had collapsed under the fire and your bathtub was filled with water and you were about to go down 17 stories to buy groceries for your family, amidst the few words you had time to tell me, you mused that Malcolm X said the chickens are coming home to roost. I have to tell you that the only time I cried in all this crisis was when I, all of a sudden, could hear C's voice on the phone. I was reminded how close you guys are to it and how fucking happy I was to know you had not been harmed by this act, which you have been trying to prevent for years. I cannot imagine what it must be like to see something so huge, and I wonder what you are thinking from moment to moment. Instead of hearing the stories of the people on the news, I am thinking about being behind your eyes, about how you must comfort a child. I know that by being yourselves, both of you are able to rationalize some of the reasons why this happened, but not ever believing that anything could be so important. What will you be like inside? Will you be afraid? Will something in you always have this to carry? Will you be wounded? Being so close to something of that magnitude, it must indeed seem like an act of war. I wonder if it is. Being so close, you must know if it feels like everything we know has changed. It seems so small, but I just want you to know how much I love you, how much a difference you have made in my life, for loving me, for accepting me, and for helping me to get calmer and become happier after all these years, for playing with me when I was young, and for laughing at my image. I want you to keep laughing. I want you not to have lost something, but maybe that is because I do not want to have lost something myself. I am so lucky that I have not lost anything.
They toured the country, as I told you, on the 5th anniversary. Then I went to Minneapolis, then I went to San Francisco, then I went to 2 universities. So
The magazine called Technological Jiu-Jitsu, what the cowboys in charge called war and the patriots clamor to pronounce cowardly. The Jews did the yearly Kaddish. The silent hide their inner feelings of helplessness and sorrow under the heel of the militant's boot. Humanists, monks, sages, rabbi, priests, imams, and the literati and Indians familiar with the same dull drumbeat that calls to war, protest, civilly for restraint. The callous soldiers smile, nod, and even wink, loading munitions, whistling. The clatter of the machines of destruction drowns out the prayer for peace. I can no longer hear the voice of reason. Ah, there it is. A whisper.
Even the birds were on fire. A meditation on the end of the United States American
It's too emotional.
Close to the tragedy, the 7 circles of hell, dead in relation to dead, wounded in relation to wounded, ran for
I want them to archive it. I don't want your
11 spirals of witnessing, in buildings, near sight, saw gore, saw jumpers, in neighborhoods, heard screams, saw planes, saw buildings collapse, lost home, lost business, lost school, lost. Proximity offers perspective. Enter the phases of illness and recovery, mourn,
But I haven't
react,
even offered because it
awe,
hasn't been
anger,
possible till
suffering.
now really to even look at the material.
Consider honoring the dead with either war or peace. I was learning how to see the world through tears, an intermittently out of focus place where details blurred and the soft barrier between waking and sleeping dissolved often. My country, a teenage empire, was welcomed into the worldhood of war that it had successfully resisted with all the reticence and denial of teenagers anywhere. A smell of death is back in my apartment. On the subway weeks later, you can tell that still most people are thinking about it. This huge absence of those buildings that many of us both hated and loved symbolized all involuntary change. Its absence is more of a constant tombstone than any actual memorial object could ever be. A reminder of thousands murdered down your street, in your neighborhood. You're smelling it. The unbelievable. Ubiquitous missing posters, snapshots as mundane as life itself. Not spectacular. Elementary school letters, poems by Whitman and unknowns. There will be dust. We have written on it. and there will be smells that throw memories of death. Panic is selfish. The obvious. People died. I waited by the radio. I heard about a man who had walked all the way home to 92nd Street, his face smeared with ash, his suit soaked through with sweat. I heard about a man who fled his home after a computer blew into the house. I heard about an old couple tottering across the Williamsburg Bridge. Nobody can hurt us in Brooklyn, said the woman. And then the radio spoke again, a sentence that began, a firefighter killed by a falling body. I covered my face with my hands. The smoke coiled upward, constantly giving birth to itself. There was a hideous solidity to it. It was our new building. Rule 434. Saranya Swinnervan, 23 years old, 5'6", 115 pounds, date of birth 8/17/78. Missing loved one, Casey Cho, height 5'7", weight 130 pounds. Worked for Martian McLennan on the 99th floor, Tower 1. Note, has tattoo of dragon down the middle of back with a Chinese character in red. Also has a tribal tattoo along center lower back above tailbone. If you have any information on her whereabouts, please call. We saw the first memorial in Washington Square as we walked toward Jennifer's West Village apartment, following a band of blue sky. In the chain-link fence surrounding Washington Arch, people had left flowers. There were dozens of missing signs, scores of candles, a quote from Gandhi, a quote from Chief Seattle. Someone had left big sheets of poster board and a pen on the fence. I wanted to leave something, but a knot of shock, of grief, stopped up my throat. Peace on earth, I wrote. I watched a young bike messenger take a sheet of paper and weave it into the chain-link fence. It was a half-burned memo that had fluttered from the towers. New Rule 434 required submissions of requests for extension of time. I request an extension of time for Saranya Srinavan. I request an extension of time for Casey Chow. I touched the scorched edges of the paper, amber, brittle as moth wings. The bike messenger pedaled south again. I understood what moved him to do this. Dear families, this is not the letter I had in mind to write to you for the first letter of the year. I was going to write about how all the teachers came into school a week early, on their own time, eager to have everything in the classrooms just right for the children, fresh and clean and interesting for a great new year, full of potential for learning and growing. I wanted to write about how eager the children were to be in class and to dig right into their studies. And I wanted to write about how great it was to see you and how I was looking forward to working with you this year. That was then, before Tuesday. And now is now, and it is different. I have to write about how, overlaid on an event of unspeakable horror, I found selflessness, love, and generosity. The instant this tragedy struck, parents came into the school offering help, asking what they could do. Parents set up an information center, brought food, relayed messages to the classes, helped at lunch and recess, and managed the release of children to adults. They worked the telephones tirelessly, trying to locate parents and guardians who we knew worked in the Twin Towers or nearby, and making sure each child would be picked up by a grown-up. Parent after parent offered their homes to any stranded family or staff member. There was no way that we could have managed the school and maintained such a smooth and calm environment without all the dear people who assisted us that day. Parents came who had witnessed terrible sights. I'm proud and grateful that our school could be a safe haven, a place to find some peace and relief, some strength from being together. As I walked from class to class, I saw children happily drawing, writing, reading, and working with each other. I am in awe of how the classroom staff could reach into themselves and find the strength to be calm and to provide normalcy so that the day could be as regular, comfortable, and stress-free for the children as possible. Lastly, the Parents' Aid allowed us one by one to notify our families when we were safe and find out about them. We were able to make arrangements for our children and collect them. Words cannot express how thankful we are to be part of this community. Today, again, we will keep children indoors at recess to keep them as safe and secure as possible. All children must be picked up at dismissal by an adult. After-school programs will be canceled until further notice. If we have to evacuate our building for any reason, we will go to PS 19 at First Avenue and 11th Street. Last night, our staff got together to discuss how we are going to help the children deal with what happened. We will begin the day with a meeting so that children can express their feelings and thoughts. We want children to know that we care and listen. We want to be able to answer their questions as best we can and provide the correct information if they are confused about anything. We want to reassure them that we try as hard as we can to keep them safe and secure, as we did on Tuesday and every day. We want to be truthful and address what happened at their level of development. Importantly, we want to help them continue to develop caring and empathy. We want to continue to encourage the use of words to solve problems and instill the hope that groups of people and governments can use words to solve problems. If they would like to take action, writing letters, donating supplies, etc., we will help them. We, staff and families, need to look out for the physical symptoms of anxiety. Children may not be able to talk about their worries, and they can come out in the following ways: headaches, stomach aches, backaches, trouble breathing or sleeping, nightmares, withdrawal, increased arguing, irritability, increased worry, loss of concentration, clinging behavior, refusal to go to school. We will provide materials for children so that they can work out and express their feelings through art, drama, and writing, as well as discussion.
And people are so damn gullible. You know what I mean? It's just like, do you not use your head to think? It's not just what people say, it's what they don't say. Watch their face, watch their body language. What do they really say, you know? And I'm so not a conspiracy person, but this was a conspiracy. I think.
I'm trying to present it without, I represent everything equally.
I have another one. Just like I deal with
Among my friends, the following possibilities are not out-counted. That Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with this, that it could have been anyone, including U.S. citizens, that there was failure of communication between Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, the Federal Aviation Agency, and the World Financial Centers in Manhattan, and that we, my friends, may never know what happened because there is ample opportunity for U.S. government power to reconstitute evidence to tell whatever story advances their own agenda. We are expected to go on with it, our lives, the engine of the economy, urban dwelling, keeping our friends' businesses afloat, shelving our grief. We are drowning in information and disinformation, totally unconfident in the verity or trustworthiness of what we read, hear, or see. Older men and women and children in our communities are already parroting rumors we know to be false, yet we cannot refute them without arguing with our elders. And that is uncouth in a time of grief. We are a city dazed. Le grand grotesque, macabre burlesque, the sick jingo. American flags cut into Klansmen's robes would at least remind white America what it could become, backward looking. Nostalgia has become whitewashing. profiling people as evil, less, ugly, or handicapped in this place of a million eyes, eyes upon eyes that watch and watch and watch and stare and record every action, every move, with running commentary of those who would dare to say what is not American. What is American? The illness continues among nations as among religions. Pomp and grieving in public, parading crocodile tears beside real horror and pain, the very real, the surreal, and the hyper-real are all made one in boiling steel, and in the vicious, vengeful eyes of the racist, ignorant, soulless fool who has never known war. Real hell is the stories of the survivors on the losing side. Ask the Iraqis, the Afghanis, the Kosovar.
Blowback. Blowback. Who now will kneel and take the cross and rise with purest hearts? The challenge has been laid. Our marketplace, our global web of trade, our goodwill towards all that otherwise must elevate the world and civilize the backward lands are now unfairly made targets of hate. But do not be dismayed by history's tangled strands. Men far more wise than we have brought us to this solemn night. They have sagely reckoned every cost, and though 3,000 souls to dust are lost, dispersed across our city, wind-tossed and whipped to sea, let no one in the sight of this ashen cloud doubt that we are right.
Derelict. I went up to Union Square again to tape up more cards. On Tuesday, I had gone at 5, just as work was letting out, and on Wednesday, I went at 4, so perhaps that accounted for it, but something felt different. I started working at the edges, as I had before, and saw that the same jerk who defaced my cards on Monday had come back. My cards from Tuesday were gone, but many of the other messages urging peace had been scrawled over. War for peace. A woman with wild, unbrushed hair and a torn-off sandal strap asked for more of my cards, speaking very quickly. Her movements were tight and jagged. Political fervor? How many 21-cent stamps would you need to resell to get high? Mixed in with the flowers, candles, photographs, and signs, I saw more religious leaflets than I had the day before. A man asked about my cards and invited me to join his church. Another man paced back and forth, selling enamel flag pins. $2, just $2. These colors don't run, and the people who wear these colors don't run. A gift for your family or loved one. I moved away from the edges to the crowded base of the square, where the pool of candles and flowers spread for 100 feet, and the statue of George Washington on his war horse had been chalked over with peace signs. No war, not in our name. I put up my cards until they were gone. A family of beautiful dark-haired women and girls took the last few. As I walked away, I saw they all had identical t-shirts. Volunteer minister. The only music in the square was a drum, which sounded every 4 or 5 seconds from the clump of dreadlocked white teenagers camped on the grass with their dogs and sleeping bags. Only the faces of the dead above the wilted petals and the melted wax retained their power. Ramon Grijalvo, Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield, 26th floor, One World Trade Center. Filipino, Asian, 58 years old. Filipino, 58 years old, 4'11", 130 pounds, salt and pepper curly hair, very distinctive thick brown toenails. I turned to leave for home. The Shrine of Rage. A week after the attacks, we had to go by plane to San Francisco. That morning, I packed my bags and stood at the window. The white smudge that was left of the column of smoke was invisible against the overcast sky. I went outside. A soft rain was blowing down, and I looked around carefully. What would I want to think of if I were dying? The corner of St. Mark's and 2nd Avenue seemed precious enough to me. Red brick and sycamore trees, buildings named Ida and Florence, Gem Spa, La Selka, the Ottendorfer Library, The smell of grease at Dallas BBQ, the smell of coffee at Puerto Rico, the iron railings, the ginkgo leaves, the green clematis vines reaching up the side of my building, to say nothing of the blue morning glories twining upward with their wet green heart-shaped leaves. I stopped to look at the morning glories, blue trumpets, blue faces, each blue blast a single-throated whirl, like a beloved's ear or anus. The cool, wet petals felt like thin skin, soft and taut. How could a single thing evoke a jewel, a wrist, a face, a clock, a bell, a love, stained glass? How could anything be this beautiful? How could you see something beautiful and want to die? How could you see this and want to kill? You fucking bastards, how could you harden your hearts to beauty?
America in 2002. A teenaged culture lacking all restraint. A polity for plutocrats who own the stale discourse to stifle every complaint. A public kept amnesiac and shown endless simulacra fashioned to taint their dreams with sham desires. A swift, unknown future racing down as the planet burns, its scientists ignored. An oil-drenched state with its oil-dipped king that justly earns the world's scorn as its industries propagate guns across the globe, then outraged turns the wounded victim when zealotry learns to aim the violence back. Is the hour too late to ask if Rome was just or merely great?
Do Americans really believe they are a chosen people? Why should God bless America? God bless America? God bless America? Only America? Having mourned the distant deaths of so many, invisible to others, makes us tougher in the presence of deaths now so visible to the ones around us. Having said that, I am, of course, no exception to the feelings of depression and the questioning of direction so many of us are experiencing. However, below the fragile surface of the current water, there is a strong current, thousands of lives and years deep, and in that current I am strong, for I know with whom I stand.
That complacency of empire